Hello, I'm John Deere. Welcome to Living Nonviolence. This is the third of our 6 videos for our 6-week class together. Gandhi once said, "Nonviolence means avoiding injury to anyone or anything on earth in thought, word, and deed." So with that in mind, this week I want to look at the second of the 3 attributes of nonviolence from my book. Practicing meticulous interpersonal nonviolence toward all people on the planet from now on, as well as all creatures in creation. I think we're all experts at violence. So the challenge is to practice active, loving nonviolence like Gandhi and Dr. King for the rest of our lives. That's the goal. I actually think that's the spiritual life. And it's a high bar, but it's worth pursuing. And my thought is, in heaven, we're all going to be perfectly nonviolent, so I figure, let's just get with the program and start practicing it. Really, we'll never be perfectly nonviolent, and we can always be more nonviolent and help others be more nonviolent. For me, it's actually like AA. We're alcoholics trying to be sober for the rest of our lives. We're violent people trying to be sober, nonviolent for the rest of our lives. So we turn to our higher power, we make restitution to those we've hurt, and we go forward to help others be freed of violence and become more nonviolent. The point is to get with the program and to work the program and pursue nonviolence for ourselves and the world for the rest of our lives. So, being nonviolent toward every person you know and every person you meet for the rest of your lives. How are you doing with that? That's what I want to invite us to reflect on this week and next week. And I'll have a few points for you. First, we want to be nonviolent toward everyone, to practice meticulous interpersonal nonviolence to everyone around us, to our families, our children, our parents, our neighbors, our co-workers, everyone in our local community, and to then have that attitude of nonviolence toward everyone around the world, so that in fact we're in loving solidarity with all our sisters and brothers around the planet, all 7.2 billion people. I invite us to set our sights high because that's what Gandhi and King did. So that means, what does that mean? Well, we have to renounce violence toward others and not hit anyone or hurt anyone, make it easier for ourselves to be nonviolent. It means getting rid of any weapons we have, really trying not to hurt others and letting go of resentments and wounds and forgiving everyone who ever hurt us, trying to outdo one another in kindness, and then joining communities of peace and nonviolence, and always, as Martin Luther King said, trying to widen our circle into what he called the beloved community. We're talking about a journey of living nonviolence that leads to universal love, universal compassion, universal peace. I just love that. Second, we reflect on the people we do not want to be nonviolent to. The people who push our buttons, who trigger our inner violence. I mean, there's always someone we like to get back at and see get a little revenge. Oddly enough, they become our teachers of nonviolence. First of all, because they expose our violence. How do we become more nonviolent to others? How do we become more patient and compassionate? There's a great saint, Therese of Lisieux, who I think was one of the great experts on interpersonal nonviolence in history. As a young girl, she entered the Carmelite monastery in France, and much to her dismay, she found that most of the nuns were mean. So she spent her life experimenting with nonviolent, compassionate love to them. She was like Edison, experimenting with gospel nonviolence as a scientific experiment. So she's a great teacher, and her autobiography is worth studying. However people treated her, if they were mean, nasty, or if they were cold or indifferent, or if they were angry and dismissive, whatever, she responded with nonviolent compassionate love. And that's what you and I want to do too. So who are the people who trigger our violence, who push our buttons? And how can we respond as nonviolently as possible to them? That's why the inner work is so important. We want to be conscious, mindful, gentle, and peaceful at all times, especially if you're working for justice and peace. So that when people reject us or put us down or dismiss us, we can let it go and not retaliate and not attach ourselves to that hurt, but always be understanding and centered in peace and keep going forward with the work. That's the methodology of interpersonal nonviolence, which Gandhi said can then be applied to the whole world. So in our interpersonal nonviolence, we want to be people of empathy, people who listen well to others, people of compassion. If you want to learn more about this, I really recommend studying the great teachings and writings of Pema Chodron, the great Buddhist nun. If you want to learn more about nonviolent communication skills, I recommend the great book Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Basically, we're talking about relearning how to live in love with others, how to listen to others, how to always have empathy and compassion for others, which means letting go of our own egos and narcissism and trying to be patient and kind, never to yell or make demands or make things worse, but always to be affirming and loving others on their journeys of peace. Well, in speaking, we want to speak with clarity and wisdom, be mindful and compassionate as we relate to everyone around us, but always to live and speak and act within the boundaries of nonviolence. We never want to humiliate another person or hurt anyone in thought, word, or deed, just as we don't want to allow others to humiliate or hurt us as well. I was thinking about this. We are against empire, but we also don't want to live like little emperors, running around and hurting others or controlling others and so forth. Always serving others, loving others, making peace with others. Third, going deeper into this, we want to train ourselves so that we never retaliate. This is the key. We have to learn the methodology of creative nonviolence in response to the threat of violence. So that means we want to let go of even the desire for revenge. That's what Gandhi taught, for retaliation. We know that violence in response to violence always leads to further violence. And the only way we can break free from the cycle of violence is to refrain from violence. And that's why we're talking about moving into nonviolence. But we're not talking about passivity. It's active, creative love. We stand our ground in nonviolence, but we refuse to retaliate while still insisting that we're all brothers and sisters and we can live in peace together. See, the world says there's only two options in the face of violence. You can fight back with violence using the means of your opponent, or you can run away and do nothing. Nonviolence gives you a third option. It's amazing. Creative, active, peaceful resistance to humiliation or violence. Jesus taught this in the Sermon on the Mount, saying, this is the quote from the Sermon on the Mount, "Offer no violent resistance to one who does evil." And then he goes on and talking about turning the other cheek. Gandhi comes along and says we can apply that methodology of personal, interpersonal nonviolence to nations and the world, and that's what we're trying to do. So, if someone is mean to you or threatens you, we know that if we respond with violence, we will probably get hurt. So the teaching is not to be afraid, but always try to respond with love and truth, and to help the other person remember our common humanity. So we trust in God, and we engage the person nonviolently. We say, hey, don't hurt me. What's wrong? How can I help you? Until that person comes back to his senses and he becomes sane again. I've tried this throughout my life. In war zones, soup kitchens, and prisons I've been in, and I've seen it work. Gandhi and King are right. Jesus, Gandhi, and King call us to be nonviolent and loving. This is where the rubber hits the road. Even to the point that we would accept suffering without retaliating, as we insist on the truth of our common humanity until the scales fall from the eyes of our opponents and we're reconciled. Gandhi and King talked about this every day of our life. This thing that King said morning, noon, and night, his sentence was, unearned suffering love is always redemptive. This is how it works. And Gandhi had this sentence, just as violence requires the willingness to hurt and kill, the practice of nonviolence requires the willingness to accept suffering and be killed in the struggle for justice and peace. Jesus called this taking up the cross. So this means we have to let go of our fear and not be afraid. We trust in God, live in love, and go forward in peace to work for peace and justice. So 3 questions for you. How can we become more nonviolent to those we know and meet? How can, in other words, how can we become better at interpersonal nonviolence, at patience and compassion and love toward those around us? Second, who do we not want to be nonviolent to, and how can we become more nonviolent to them? How can we let these people be our teachers and train us in the practice of interpersonal nonviolence? And third, how prepared are we to respond nonviolently in any situation at any time? What are we afraid of, and how can we be more fearless? Thank you very much. send some comments and questions in. Please write a reflection or a journal entry for the class discussion board by the end of the week. God bless you and peace be with you.